We are so fortunate this morning to have Christopher Wilson with us, who is sharing his extensive knowledge of St. John of the Cross, as well as St. Teresa of Avila. We're looking forward, Christopher, to a wonderful time with you. Thank you, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Betty. Thanks so much. And thanks everyone for being here. I've been very excited about this. And I do have Charles right here behind me. So he's going to jump in if I get stuck on something or if he has ideas. I told him to interrupt. And I've also given him an assignment of 2 things to do during this talk. So you'll get to see him also. So I guess the first thing to say is, why are we here talking about St. John of the Cross on Baba Zoom? Because Baba did highlight other saints, especially Teresa of Avila, showed great interest in Christian mysticism, Catherine of Siena, Teresa. But as far as I know, he never mentioned John of the Cross. There's no record of him calling attention to John or John's poetry. However, when Baba was in Avila with some of his Eastern and Western Mandali in 1933, the topic of John must have come up because John was Teresa's good friend and confessor and student and sometimes spiritual director and someone who worked very closely with her in her reform of the Carmelite order. So Avila is very steeped in the history of John of the Cross as well as Teresa. So surely when Baba and Marina and the others who were there going from place to place associated with Teresa, the topic of John would have come up. But for me, there are a few reasons of why John feels like such an important part of my life with Baba. And first of all, because of his closeness to Teresa, one of Baba's favorite saints. And what you see in the art is what you find in their lives, that these two were people who worked so closely together. Teresa had enormous admiration for John and him for her. And it was a very intimate friendship. And we'll talk about how they worked closely together, especially in Avila when John was her kind of confessor and spiritual director. So we'll get to that. And then also that for life with Baba, John provides a kind of map for the spiritual life that I think is very akin to what Baba gives us. That what John says about things like the lover-beloved relationship, the annihilation of the ego as being necessary for union with God, those things feel very much like what Baba talks about, both in his cosmology and in statements that he gave, like the highest of the high. And then, of course, for me, a very personal reason why I love John is because of Jane Haynes. And I've talked about Jane before on these Baba Zooms. But Jane, first learned about St. Teresa in 1958 when Baba mentioned St. Teresa in the barn at Mayher Spiritual Center. Reading Teresa led her to John of the Cross. And so she went with Elizabeth Patterson to Spain and visited places associated with Teresa's life and also with John's life, including going to the city of Segovia, where John's tomb is. And here I'm just showing you the picture, her copy of John's complete works in Spanish. By her front door, she had the complete works of John and of Teresa, these 2 volumes, very well worn, which she loved. And she took little pictures of Baba inside them. This one, I think she originally had a picture enclosed in the frontispiece here, where she says that this picture was taken by Padre Juan Bautista in 1974. So anyway, her John, and she really taught me a lot about John when she talked about insights she had gathered from him, reading him, and how it informed her thinking about Baba. It really meant so much. John, of course, is regarded as one of the great poets in the Spanish language, maybe the greatest poet in the Spanish language, right up there with Lorca. He, in addition to his poems, he wrote prose works, which are commentaries on the poems, in which he expands on some of the ideas in the poems, and makes a lot of scriptural references and goes into a lot of theology about concepts such as the Dark Night, which we'll talk about. I would say that his main theme that we'll see in his poems and his other writings is the longing of the lover for the beloved, the longing of the soul for the eternal Christ, for the ancient one, for our Meher Baba. And then conjoined with that longing for the beloved is his emphasis on the purgative way, the negation of the I, the destruction of desires and attachments. And it's very much like Baba's book, The Everything and the Nothing, that John is talking about how you get to the everything, to the beloved, to the eternal Christ, and then how you get rid of the nothing. And in John's world, nothing is desires, attachments, even desire for spiritual consolation. All those things have to be extinguished in order to unite with the everything, in order to unite with the beloved. And you'll see why, because of his emphasis on the extinguishing of all those things, all those desires and attachments, he's often called the doctor of nada, the doctor of nothing, because of his emphasis on the way of nada, which is the way of extermination of all those things that act as barriers between us and reaching the beloved. I'll just go through a very short biography of John. He was born in 1542 in the town of Fonteveros in central Spain in Castile. This is the basin where he was baptized. Charles and I went to all these John of the Cross places on some of our trips. His father was named Gonzalo de Yepes. He was a rich merchant, but his father was disinherited from his wealthy family because his father married a poor woman, Catalina Alvarez, who was a weaver. And so he lost the family inheritance, and then things financially got much worse when John's father died, when John was just 3 years old. So that left the impoverished Catalina to care for John and John's brother. They lived in a town called Medina del Campo, and John received his education at a school for orphans there. Even though he wasn't an orphan, it was a school that would have, tended to the poor and the neglected. So that's where he went. When he was 17 years old, he went to a Jesuit school for 4 years, and he felt called to be a monk. He felt he had a monastic vocation, and at the age of 21, he chose the Carmelite order to join. And that's the image that you see here. I'm an art historian, so I love showing works of art, but this is from a series of engravings of the life of John of the Cross that were printed in Brussels in 1678. And in this one, what you see is John as a young man kneeling in front of the altar as the Carmelite priest gives him the Carmelite habit. So John is making his profession of vows on this day. After he became a Carmelite monk, he was a student at the University of Salamanca. The Carmelites had their own college as part of the university. And University of Salamanca was one of the best universities in Europe at the time. And that's where John got a very thorough education in the church fathers like Augustine and Ambrose. He read Thomas Aquinas. He would have learned classical literature there, things like Aristotle and Ovid. So he was very learned because of his years in Salamanca, and that served him well when he's writing his prose commentaries on his poems, because he's constantly drawing from all these different sources that he's quoting in order to make his own points. When John was 25, he was feeling disaffected by what he was experiencing within the Carmelite order. this was the unreformed Carmelite order. This was the order before Teresa had done her work. And so the Carmelites at the time when John was a monk, he felt they were too lax, that there wasn't enough emphasis on silence, contemplative prayer, that there were too many worldly distractions, even within the monastery. And so he was considering leaving the Carmelite order and joining a more strict order, the Carthusians. And he was on the brink of making this decision when he met St. Teresa. And Teresa at that time, she had already founded her first convent of nuns in Avila. That was founded in 1562. And then she was busy founding more and more convents. And the purpose of her convents was to create a way of life that was much more strict and austere than the current Carmelites. And she felt like the Carmelite order had become too lax, that, that nuns were out walking around, that they were spending too much of their day in conversation, that they were entertaining visitors, that there was more emphasis on vocal prayer than contemplative prayer. And so Teresa started her own reform where she tried to get back to what she understood as the original Carmelite rule before it had been watered down, that emphasized being in constant prayer, not talking except for during your recreation hour, the convent supporting itself through the work of the nuns' hands, in addition to donations, emphasis on poverty, emphasis on erasure of class differences within the convent. Some of the convents in Spain at this time, class differences were very apparent. Rich nuns from richer families would sometimes have multiple rooms. They would sometimes have servants. They would adorn their habits with finery. And Teresa thought that all that was absurd. And so she was initiating this reform that was supposed to be much more strict, because she thought that was necessary for, to really be what a Carmelite is supposed to be. You're supposed to be in constant prayer, and you're supposed to be in imitation of Jesus's poverty. Oh yeah, and Charles mentioned, and the nuns do not leave that building. Once they enter in, there's the rule of enclosure, that's where they stay forever in their constant prayer. Now, Teresa wanted to extend this branch of the Carmelite order to men. She wanted to start founding monasteries for monks as well, because she felt like they too needed to go back to this austere, original Carmelite rule. For the men, it was a little different. The male monasteries of men did not have that rule of enclosure, because friars were often in the role of being confessors or spiritual directors at communities outside the monastery walls. So they didn't have the same rules of enclosure that the women did. But she did intend for them to have the emphasis on constant prayer and poverty and silence, except for when they were called to do duties that required them to speak, such as hearing confessions.
Did you say why it's called discalced?
And yes, Charles said, why is it called discalced Carmelites? Discalced means barefoot. And so they're called the Carmelitas descalzas, because the nuns would wear sandals with open toes as a sign of their poverty, in contrast to the calced or the shod Carmelites, who wore full shoes that covered their toes. So having these poor sandals was supposed to be a reflection of their poverty. So they're the discalced Carmelites. So Teresa was praying to God, like, give me the right friars that I can have for starting this new reform for men. And that's what you see in this image I'm showing you. Teresa is kneeling before an altar. Jesus appears to her. He's hovering above the altar, and he is pointing through a window to a friar dressed in a Carmelite habit who's kneeling, and that's John of the Cross, right? And so the idea is that Christ is revealing to Teresa the perfect person to be the first Carmelite friar. And so she had found, she talked with John in this little town where John had grown up, Medina del Campo, and in the year 1567. And this is the room where that happened. So if you go into a Carmelite convent, a discalced Carmelite convent in Spain, there's a room called the locutorio. And that is the room where the public can be, while the nuns are on the other side of the metal grill that you see here, right? So John would have been like in one of these chairs in the locutorio, he would have seen Teresa through the grill because she would have been within the enclosed space of the convent. And as soon as they started talking, they just clicked. Teresa felt like she had found someone that she could really connect with, who understood what she was doing, and that he had the right qualities to be one of the first friars. And this is how she describes their first meeting. You know, I like reading her language. A little later, it happened that a young father came who was studying at Salamanca. His name was Fray John of the Cross, Juan de la Cruz. I praised our Lord, and when I spoke with this young friar, he pleased me very much. I learned from him how he also wanted to go to the Carthusians, right? Because he's thinking about changing orders. Telling him what I was attempting to do, I begged him to wait until the Lord would give us a monastery, and pointed out the great good that would be accomplished if, in his desire to improve, he were to remain in his own order, and that much greater service would be rendered to the Lord. He promised he would remain as long as he wouldn't have to wait long, right? So he promises Teresa, okay, I'll stay in the Carmelite order if you move forward quickly with this plan to start the first Discalced Carmelite monastery. Teresa liked to make jokes about him being small because he was around 5 feet or maybe even 4'11". So he's tiny, and she sometimes referred to him as her little Seneca, in reference to the ancient Roman writer. In one of her letters, she says, although he is small, I know that he is great in the eyes of God. Or when she visited the first Discalced Carmelite monastery, John was there with another father, Antonio de Jesus, and Teresa looked at them and said, well, God has given me a friar and a half, right? John being the half because he was so tiny. But anyway, she loved him. And that was always done in good humor. So Teresa needed to find a place where John and Antonio could live, where they could find the first monastery. She took advantage of that time, that in-between time of starting the monastery, to really teach John about their way of life. And Teresa was in the city of Valladolid at the time. She was starting her first convent of nuns in that city. And she called John there for a kind of tutoring session that went on for a while. And she explained to him, what is the primitive Carmelite rule supposed to be, the original Carmelite rule? Here is our way of life. Here's how you do it for the friars. And so, you know, I think it's really important to think about the unusualness of this at the time, that you've got a woman who is the founder of an order and a woman who is a teacher of men. You know, and that's in contrast to something like the Franciscan order, where you had Francis of Assisi starting the order and then teaching Clare, you know, how to be a Franciscan nun. You know, that was the more common pattern. So you've got the situation here where a woman is founding the order and the men are a spinoff. And Teresa, you know, so much throughout her life, she assumed roles that women were really not supposed to be doing in patriarchal society in 16th century Spain. And women were not supposed to be theologians. You know, that was reserved for men who studied at universities like Salamanca. They were not really supposed to be teachers of men. You know, there was great emphasis that, you know, women's place is to be in silence. And so Teresa is taking on these kind of authoritative leadership teaching roles. She's engaging in theological discourse in her books, you know, which often brought her trouble from male critics who thought that she was overstepping the bounds of what a woman was supposed to do. And it was really a source of anxiety within the Discalced Carmelite order after her death. The friars feeling like, I think some of them feeling a lot of masculine anxiety about that they were from a order started by a woman. And it still continues today. I have a friend who's a Discalced Carmelite friar, and he was talking about how sometimes they would play basketball against the other Carmelites, the Calced Carmelites, and that the Calced Carmelites would tease them and say, Oh, you guys, you're from an order that was founded by a woman. So one of the things I've written about is how there was a lot of effort after Teresa's death to really boost John of the Cross to being placed on a pedestal as being a kind of co-reformer with Teresa, instead of her being the one who really started this effort and her being John's teacher, to kind of place him on an even keel with her, or even sometimes to elevate him so that he's shaped to look like a teacher of Teresa, and to therefore to conform more to expectations of men and women. Teresa visited his first monastery. It was at a little town called Duruelo, and it was a pretty much just a very primitive, broken down building that they outfitted with an altar. And Teresa came to visit, and it was just the two friars. She first saw Friar Antonio de Jesus, who was out sweeping when Teresa arrived, and she said, you know, Father Antonio, what has become of your honor? Here you are out here with a broom. And he said, I curse the day I ever had any. He was happy to be doing that humble task. And then she greeted John. And then she walked through and she said she was amazed by what she saw. She said there were crosses and skulls everywhere. Like, it was very austere. They had skulls that they would meditate on to remind them of the brevity of life. And then all these homemade crosses that they had made out of things like sticks and paper. Right. And so it was very somber and austere. But Teresa said it was so moving. She talks about one of the crosses. I never forget a little cross they had made for the holy water font with sticks and a paper image of Christ attached to it. It inspired more devotion than if it had been something very expertly carved. So, you know, that was really the beginning of their relationship. Eventually, Teresa was called back to the city of Avila, to the convent of the Incarnation. The Incarnation was not a discalced Carmelite convent. It was the regular Carmelite convent that Teresa had lived in early in her life. And she was called there to work on that community, to try to elevate its standards. And the nuns of the Incarnation really wanted her back. And so they elected her as prioress. Teresa was not thrilled about that because she would have preferred to be going around Spain, starting more discalced Carmelite convents. But under a vow of obedience, she went back and she lived at the Incarnation. And John of the Cross was called there to be a confessor to the nuns and be a confessor to Teresa herself. And it was on one of those occasions when a mystical experience occurred, according to Teresa's nuns, when John and Teresa were so enraptured in their conversations about God that they were seen to levitate. Now, this is, of course, a major theme in Teresa's writings, her mystical experiences, the visions that she experienced, the words that she heard spoken from God. She did say that there were times where her body would lift up off of the ground. And it was a source of embarrassment for her. She didn't want to make a spectacle of herself. And so she said that, if this would happen and there were people around, that she would try to grab onto something to anchor her body to the ground. She didn't want that kind of attention. But on this particular occasion, apparently, a nun saw John and Teresa seated on either side of the locatorio grill, hovering in their ecstasy. So how did Teresa view John during these years? Here are some things she said. He's a good man, a real saint. She wrote to the King of Spain, Philip II, about him in 1577. He is so great a servant of our Lord that the nuns here are truly edified, and the city is amazed by the remarkable amount of good he has done there. And so they consider him a saint. And in my opinion, he is one and always has been. But there was a very bumpy road ahead, both for John and Teresa, because there were tensions within the Carmelite order about this reform. And there was a lot of resentment from Carmelites who didn't want to be reformed, who didn't want to be told that they needed to have a more austere way of life. And this is before the two orders were separated. So at this time, there was still like one Carmelite order, and within that order were Teresa and John, who were following this discalced way of life. And so that provoked resentment from some of their, superiors. Some, not all. That led to John being kidnapped and taken to the city of Toledo and imprisoned. He was imprisoned within a Carmelite monastery because of these tensions within the order, and kept in appalling conditions. And it's hard to believe today, that other monks would keep a monk, John, imprisoned in a tiny cell that was 10 by 6 feet, a room that had previously been used as a toilet, in solitary confinement, with only one small window high in the wall. He was regularly flogged, only given a prayer book to read, very meager food. John's health deteriorated rapidly. And his clothes, of course, he had no opportunity to wash, so his clothes were infested with lice. So he was in this prison for 9 months under those conditions. But even despite this cruelty, when he was released, according to the people who knew him, John didn't speak harshly of his captors. And here's how Teresa talked about it when she was talking about John's imprisonment. She said, "God treats his friends terribly. Truly, though, he does them no wrong, since that is the way he treated his son, Jesus." In prison, things improved for John a little bit when there was a kind jailer who gave him a pen and paper and allowed him a short time to be out of his cell, right? So that he could be in daylight. And it was during this period that John wrote some of his poems, including his most famous, the poem, The Dark Night. In August of 1578, John managed to escape, and he had been planning it for a while. He was taking advantage of that time outside of his cell to loosen the screws on the lock of his door. And he made a rope out of torn blankets that he had. And so he planned all this. And one night he was able to push open his cell door. He took his makeshift blanket rope, extended it out the window, and climbed down and landed on a wall that was like a border from the river that was churning below. And he went to the monastery of nuns, the Discalced Carmelite monastery convent of nuns in the city of Toledo. The nuns immediately took him in, kept him safe there, and then John was transported to a hospital in Toledo because he was very weakened. And he remained in the hospital for 6 weeks, recovering. After that episode, John was sent to southern Spain, to Andalusia, because part of the purpose was to assign him to posts that were far away from where this had all happened, so that he would be less vulnerable for being, kidnapped and imprisoned again. He became spiritual director for a community of Discalced Carmelite nuns in the city of Beas, where Charles and I went and talked to the nuns. And the prioress there was a nun who was very close to Teresa. Her name was Ana de Jesus. Oh, we'll come back to that. Ana de Jesus, who at first was very skeptical of John. When she first met him, she was kind of unimpressed and like, well, why has there been such a big deal about John of the Cross? And so she wrote to Teresa about it. And Teresa wrote her a very harsh letter back and basically reprimanded her for underestimating John. And she says, Anna, you're really wrong here. He is a divine heavenly man. He's a great treasure that the Lord has given him special grace for spiritual direction. And then as she got to know him, Ana de Jesus realized the treasure that she had. And they actually became good friends. And John dedicated his commentary on his poem, The Spiritual Canticle, to Ana de Jesus. Betty and I were talking about this before you all came on, but but John sometimes has the reputation of being very dour and austere and not talkative and antisocial. But he wasn't. From the accounts of people who knew him, John was lively, affable. He would sometimes break out in song. He loved to take his fellow monks out on hikes in nature. He loved nature, and nature imagery infuses so much of his poetry, especially the spiritual canticle. He loved to carve crucifixes. He took great joy in outfitting the altar. And he also drew. We only have two drawings by John, but one of them is this drawing of Christ on the cross. Can you all still see my screen, Betty? Okay, good.
Yes.
This is at the Convent of the Incarnation in Avila, is kept in this reliquary. It's a very small drawing he did, so unusual and moving, where you're hovering above the cross, looking down on Jesus as he's dying on the cross with drops of blood coming out of the wounds in his hands. And it's in contrast to most every other crucifixion scene that you would find painted in Spain in the 16th or 17th century, like Zurbarán's, where typically you see the cross frontally. We're positioned as if we're a spectator at the crucifixion looking at Christ on the cross. John imagines the scene as if we're in the position of an angel or even of God the Father looking down from heaven, on this horrific scene of Jesus being nailed to the cross. And it could have been the result of a visionary experience that John had. John um, John continued to face persecution within the order from friars who were unhappy with the Carmelite reform, or there were disputes for who was the trusted authority within the order. When I've read this material, it's fascinating. How even within religious orders there is such conflict and unhappiness and bickering back and forth and fights. It happened. So John was sent to the city of Segovia, and that's where his body is today. And he was prior of a monastery there. In the last few years of his life, from 1588, when he was sent to Segovia, until 1591, when he died, he really found himself sidelined by other leaders within the order. And really, they wanted to get rid of John, and they were going to send him to Mexico. And when he died, that's what was happening next. He was going to be shipped across the Atlantic. And one of the sources of resentment about John was that there was a lot of debate within the order about what should the Discalced Carmelites be doing. Are they contemplatives or should they be missionaries? And John was very much on the side that we are a contemplative order. We are not an order like the Jesuits who go out and preach, and seek to convert, what they saw as the infidel. He didn't want to do that work. And so I think in retribution for that, they were going to send him to Mexico, where that was one of the purposes of the friars, to go out and preach to the indigenous population. But he died before that happened. He died in the city of Ubeda. You can still go to the monastery where he died, and then his body was brought back to Segovia. And so this is his tomb in the Discalced Carmelite monastery there. He died December 13th, 1591. Then canonized, made a saint in the year 1726. So I wanted to get to two of his poems, two of his most famous. John was not a particularly prolific poet. His reputation really rests on a handful of poems, and really three: the Dark Night, the Living Flame of Love, and the Spiritual Canticle. But I want to look at the Dark Night first. And in the chat, I'm going to put a document in case anybody wants to read the Dark Night as we go along. Let's see. if I can do that. I may have to do that at the very end when I'm not screen sharing. I'll just project it for now, but I'll give you all the link later. So the first one, his poem called The Dark Night. This is one of the poems that he wrote in prison. It's his most famous. The Dark Night, the poem is, the speaker of the poem is a woman. Because we know this because of the feminine adjectives that end in A rather than O. And within the poem, the female speaker is leaving her house at night, secretly and in disguise, to meet her lover in an outdoor setting and to be united with him, who has the masculine endings, the adjectives that end in O. When you first read this, if you didn't know it was about John of the Cross, you would think it's a love poem between a woman and a man. And what John is doing here in this poem is using the language of earthly love, of romance, to apply to a spiritual subject, because it is meant to be a metaphor for the love between the soul and God, right? And so I know a lot of people here on this Zoom love the poetry of Rumi and Hafiz, like Baba did. And it's the same thing there. You know, the language of the lover beloved that often sounds like very sensual poetry, but you would have to know that what Hafiz is really talking about is about the soul and Allah. So the poem. One dark night, fired with love's urgent longings, ah, the sheer grace, I went out unseen, my house being now all stilled. In darkness and secure, by the secret ladder disguised, ah, the sheer grace, in darkness and concealment, my house being now all stilled. On that glad night, in secret, for no one saw me, nor did I look at anything, with no other light or guide than the one that burned in my heart. This guided me more surely than the light of noon to where he was awaiting me, him I knew so well, there in a place where no one appeared. O guiding night, O night more lovely than the dawn, O night that has united the lover with his beloved, transforming the beloved in her lover. Upon my flowering breast, which I kept wholly for him alone, there he lay sleeping, and I caressing him, there in a breeze from the fanning cedars. When the breeze blew from the turret, as I parted his hair, it wounded my neck with its gentle hand, suspending all my senses. I abandoned and forgot myself, laying my face on my beloved. All things ceased. I went out from myself, leaving my cares forgotten among the lilies. In the poem, in the first few stanzas, there's a sense of anxiety. The need to escape secretly, the need to wear a disguise, the need to wait until everything is quiet to sneak out. Maybe John had in mind his future escape from the prison. You know, he's going to have to leave his house. But then the tone of the poem changes to joy. It goes from anxiety to joy. And it's nighttime, yes, but it's a joyous nighttime. So in stanza 3, it's a glad night. And then in stanza 5, it's a guiding night. It's a night more lovely than the dawn. He plays so much here on imagery of light and dark, and that, yes, it is night, but it is the darkness of the night that allows for the union, that is the darkness that allows for the real light to shine. When you get to the last few stanzas, the pivotal moment is in stanza 5, where it says, O night that is united, the lover with his beloved, transforming the beloved in her lover. This moment of transformation, amado con amada, amada in el amado transformada, the lover transformed into the beloved, so that it's not only about their meeting, but an actual transformation of one into another through their uniting. And one of the things places I think is especially beautiful is in stanza 6, upon my flowering breast, which I kept wholly for him alone, there he lay sleeping. So the speaker of the poem is imagining the beloved, who is Christ, reclining on her chest. And what this is, it's a reworking of the imagery of the Last Supper in the book of John, the Gospel of John. Um, uh, there's a passage there where John rests his head on the breast of Jesus at the Last Supper. And what this is a reworking of that image where it's a reversal, where it's the beloved Christ who is resting his head on the breast of the lover who has come to greet him. I think one of the things that John would say about this poem is that the poem is about the journey, yes, of the soul to find the beloved, to unite with the beloved, but it is only God's grace that makes it possible. That is not only by our own efforts that we can go on this nighttime adventure in secret and find him, but it's through God's grace, through mercy, that we have the strength to accomplish this. And one of my favorite quotes from John is where he says, in the first place, it should be known that if a person is seeking God, his beloved is seeking them much more, right? So we're seeking God because God has called us to seek him. And lately, when I've been thinking about this poem and talking with Charles about it, it makes me think so much of Baba's Mara. Is my screen still up, Betty?
It's definitely, yeah, beautiful.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, what a beautiful picture of them. And her love and longing for Baba, and his love for her, that is the embodiment of this divine romance that John is talking about between the soul and the beloved, between the soul and Christ. And we have people here who, of course, have met Mara, or who might have come later to Baba who have learned about Mara. But just in case we have anybody who's newer, Baba explained that every time God takes human form, he gives the role of his beloved to one person. And in Baba's advent, that was Mara. And Mani, Baba's sister, explained it better than anybody. She said, Baba said Mara was his beloved, that he loved her most, that her love for him was matchless and childlike in its purity and simplicity, and that she was chosen to be his beloved in this advent. He would treasure her expressions of love for him and see that she was pleased always. He would tell her, if you are happy, I am happy. And really, Mara's whole life was the journey of the poem. The poem is Mara. The poem is about the motivation by one pointed love for Baba that made her so wholeheartedly, 100% attentive to him and seeking his presence, right? Intensely longing for him whenever she was away from him, whether he was traveling or certainly, agonizingly after he dropped his body. Her unceasing longing for him, her desire just to be with Baba. And I was thinking about in the poem that shift where the beloved is transformed into, where the lover is transformed into the beloved, and vice versa. And an anecdote that Mani told, and it might seem trivial because it mentions cheese, but it says a lot. She said, Baba would say, if Mara is pleased, I am pleased. Sometimes Mara said, Baba, someone has sent this cheese for you. Baba told her to have it, saying, it is as good as my having it. In other words, if you are pleased, it's as good as me being pleased, right? So that Mara was him and vice versa. Now John went on to write a commentary on the poem. He actually wrote two. The first one he called The Ascent of Mount Carmel, and the second commentary he called The Dark Night. And to accompany his ideas, he created this drawing. The original drawing doesn't survive. This is believed to be a faithful copy that was given to one of the Discalced Carmelite nuns. And what the drawing shows is it's meant to be a hill. It's supposed to be the hill of Mount Carmel in the Holy Land, from which the Carmelites got their name. And what John is showing is how you take the journey up the hill toward union with God. And right, that is the purpose of our life, that we are the soul, we are the lover, making our way up the mountain to locate and unite with the beloved. What you see written in Spanish at the bottom of the map are these maxims that he gave for how we go on this path, which is really the path of nada, the path of eradication of all desires, of all consolations, of all attachments, that as those get extinguished one by one, we make our way up the mountain for this meeting with our beloved, with God, and for our transformation into him. And to me, when I read these maxims that he gave, they are so much like Baba. To reach satisfaction in all, desire satisfaction in nothing. To come to possess all, desire the possession of nothing. To arrive at being all, desire to be nothing. To come to the knowledge of all, desire the knowledge of nothing. To come to enjoy what you have not, you must go by a way in which you enjoy not. To come to the knowledge you have not, you must go by a way in which you know not. To come to the possession you have not, you must go by a way in which you possess not. To come to be what you are not, you must go by a way in which you are not. And isn't the tone of those so much like those sayings that Baba gave in 1958 in the barn that are now on the walls of the barn, right? Desire for nothing except desirelessness. Hope for nothing except to rise above all hopes. Want nothing and you will have everything, right? So that nothing and the everything idea that it's about the stripping away, the annihilation of these things that ends up allowing us to reach the everything. And that's what the dark night means. Now, I know that sometimes people think of the dark night as being as a reference to a period of suffering or despair or trauma. But those aren't really the terms that John puts the dark night in. What the dark night means to him is that it is a night because of the shutting down of all these attachments, the extinguishing of these things one by one, so that it is a kind of darkness. Yes, it's night, but it is not only negative, it is also affirmative, because it's that very negative of darkness that allows us to reach the divine light of perfect union with God, right? So all those negations are for the sake of affirmation. That's what the dark night is. Now, another place in Baba that I think is so connected to this is his statement, the highest of the high. And that's one of Charles's very favorite things. So I asked him to come over here for a few minutes and talk about John and the highest of the high.
Well, thank you, Christopher, for including me. Yes, this is one of very, very favorite things that Baba gave, and I think most of you are very familiar with it. I think many of you may know that it was given in Dehradun and on September 7th, 1953. I asked Erich once, I don't know how it came up, but I told him how much I love this that Baba gave. And he said, yeah, do you know how it came about? I said, no, I don't know. He said, well, yeah, it so happened that you know, Baba was there, and there and these people would come to see him, and Baba wasn't seeing. So in other words, these people were coming, but Baba wasn't seeing. But Baba, in this case, a family came and they had someone in the family, as I recall, who was very ill, and they wanted Baba to help. And Baba, so they took word to Baba that this family was here and wanted his help. So Baba saw them. And Baba, you know, was very loving to them, as he always was, and asked them about what their suffering was, and they had this person with them who was suffering, and can you help, Baba, and all this. So Baba, you know, gave, like he often did, something that they could do. I don't recall what it was. Something to, maybe Erich didn't recall either, something to, you know, something they could do. And they left. And after they left, Erich said, you know, Baba said, he said to me, who do they think I am? Who do they take me to be? And Erich said, well, yeah, well, Baba, you know, they knew that some holy person was here in their area, you know, some saintly person and all that. So they naturally thought this person can help. And Baba said, yeah, that's what they said. That's what they thought. Yes, Baba. Yeah, they thought naturally. If you, yeah, you hear of this man coming, you know, being here, you can go and get help. Baba said, yeah, but he said, you know, I am not that. I am not that. And that's, Erich said, you know, that led to Baba giving the highest of the high, to make it clear that Baba said, either in the highest of the high, he says, either I'm an ordinary man, an ordinary human being, in which case, what can I do? I can't help you. Or I am the highest of the high, in which case, why would I? All that is happening to you is ordained by me for the best. So the one passage that I'll read, which I'm sure you're familiar with, instead, I won't read the whole of the highest of the high, but I'll read this one passage to give the flavor. Know you all that if I am the highest of the high, my role demands that I strip you of all your possessions and wants, consume all your desires, and make you desireless rather than satisfy your desires. Sadhus, saints, yogis, and walis can give you what you want. But I take away your wants and free you from attachments and liberate you from the bondage of ignorance. I am the one to take, not the one to give what you want or as you want. So, and I'm sure that many of you in your life with Baba know this very well, that by stripping away our attachment to the nothing, Baba leads us into what John of the Cross described as the dark night of the soul, which is, of course, an inner journey, in which the false light of the world, as Christopher said, is gradually extinguished, and the soul enters the darkness where the true light is found. Baba once said, the vehicle of light is darkness. It is darkness that establishes the existence of light. What have we lost then? What has Baba taken away through his love for us? Nothing. Nothing. Baba often quoted Hafez as saying, "The universe and its affairs are nothing into nothing." And what have we gained? What has Baba given us through his love and grace? What will he give us? Everything. Everything. You know, when I was very small, one day I was upset about something that had happened, you know, to me as a child. I don't remember what it was, but I felt really hurt, and I lost something. I don't know what it was. And Elizabeth, who I called Auntie Boo, she called me to her and she said, you know, why are you upset? And I explained to her that whatever it was, I had lost this or that, something had happened to me. Maybe it was an opportunity, you know, at school, something. And she said, yes. She said, yes, that will happen in your life. But she said, remember this, Baba will take away the rhinestones, but he will give the diamond. She said, just remember that in your life. And so that, almost better than anything I can think of, summarizes our life with Baba and what St. John of the Cross was trying to teach us. Oops.
Thank you, Charles. That was beautiful. I just want to give you one last poem. One of his other most admired ones is called "The Living Flame of Love." And John wrote this for a devout laywoman in the city of Granada. He was a spiritual director for her, and she was a patron of the Discalced Carmelite order. She was very closely associated with the Carmelites. And so John is in the city of Granada writing, and he writes this poem, and he tells us the subject of the poem in at the very beginning of the commentary that he wrote to accompany it. So what I'm showing you here is the actual poem, but he wrote another kind of treatise. This is his commentary on the poem. And he says that the poem, these are stanzas which treat of the very intimate and qualified union and transformation of the soul in God. That the poem is about the transformation of the soul in God. And he says that divine love is like the effect of fire upon wood, that flames, which are the activity of the Holy Spirit in the Christian view, penetrate and consume the wood until the wood begins to flare up and shoot. As John says, so that it's not merely united to this fire, but it produces within it a living flame. The soul is so inflamed with love of God that the soul itself becomes the fire of God, sputtering out more flame. And the way he structures this poem, the speaker is being wounded. And like the piece of wood being assailed by fire, by the fire of the Holy Spirit, and then this transformation happening. O living flame of love that tenderly wounds my soul in its deepest center. Since now you are not oppressive, now consummate, if it be your will, tear through the veil of this sweet encounter. O sweet cautery, O delightful wound, O gentle hand, O delicate touch, that tastes of eternal life and pays every debt. In killing, you change death to life. O lamps of fire in whose splendors the deep caverns of feeling, once obscure and blind, now give forth so rarely, so exquisitely, both warmth and light to their beloved. How gently and lovingly you waken my heart, where in secret you dwell alone. And in your sweet breathing, filled with good and glory, how tenderly you swell my heart with love. So the soul here, the speaker, the soul speaks in a series of exclamation. There are 6 exclamations throughout the poem. O living flame of love, O sweet cautery, O delightful wound, O gentle hand, O delicate touch, O lamps of fire. So it's like this kind of catalog of the transformations that are wrought by the flame of love within the soul. This poem, the imagery of this poem, fire and wounding, this is all deeply rooted in Christian mysticism, going way back to, well, just as a few examples, Hildegard of Bingen, who I show you here, the medieval German nun who wrote about one of her most famous visionary experiences was when she felt flames descend upon her head, which is what you're seeing here. And that even though she didn't have any formal theological education, suddenly these flames infused her with divine knowledge. And she said that she understood everything that the scriptures and the Psalms were saying because of the flame of wisdom that came down from God. So fire is a common imagery that you see in mysticism, and then also wounding. And the most famous example of that is St. Francis being given the stigmata when the angel, the seraph, appears to him at Laverna and pierces his hands and feet and side with the wounds that Christ suffered on the cross. So John is drawing on that tradition, fire and wounding. And then the one that would have been closest to his heart is Teresa herself, who experienced a fiery wounding. Teresa's most famous mystical experience is when she saw an angel at her side who had a large golden dart with fire at the tip of the arrow. And the angel plunged the dart into her heart several times, and she said it was painful, but it left her all on fire with love of God. And I've given a talk about this poem before, and I really think that the poem is meant to be an elegy for Teresa. The poem was written just a few years after her death. And of course, John, and the nuns who were so close to Teresa were bereft. After Teresa, their companion, their friend, their teacher, their mentor, when she departed this earth, of course, they missed her terribly. And I think John has Teresa in mind, where he's really what the speaker is. The speaker is like Teresa herself, who is being wounded with flame, with dart, with arrow that fills her with love of God and transforms her into him. And that ultimately it results in death, the death of the ego, the annihilation. And in fact, Teresa's early biographers said that she died from this kind of heavenly wounding. That during her lifetime, she had experienced this wounding, this vision of wounding on her deathbed, that she was pierced so much with the fiery dart of God that it finally separated her soul from her body. And that's what's happening in the poem. And the great poetry critic and scholar Helen Vindler, when she talks about what the purpose of a lyric poem is, she says a poem is a script for the reader to say. And what John is doing is giving his readers a script. He's giving this pious laywoman that he wrote it for a script. He's giving the nuns around him a script, nuns who got copies of the poem, so that as they recite the poem, they are put in the position of Teresa, experiencing this wounding, this painful and delightful wounding with a fiery point that transforms them into love of God. John is at his most, well, we'll get to that. Let's go back to Bob. John is really at his most radical when he's talking about this transformation that occurs when the soul is united with God, where really the soul becomes God-like. And it's based on, of course, Christian doctrine that the human was created in the image of God. But for John, he takes that idea to such an extreme where John says that when the soul arrives at this union with God, that the soul becomes what he calls deiform. The soul becomes God through participation. He says the soul is like God through this transformation. Souls possess the same goods by participation that the Son, Jesus, possesses by nature. As a result, they are truly gods by participation, equals and companions of God. Now, it doesn't get much more Baba-like than that, because really it's so much like Baba's imagery of the dropped soul, right? That everything is God. There's nothing that is not God. That the soul is a droplet, in the God Speaks cosmology, that makes this lengthy journey of reincarnation and then involution to realize itself as God. And then when it is finally in this ocean, the droplet becomes aware of its godness. And that's what's happening in these John of the Cross poems and commentaries, that the soul realizes its own divinity that's achieved through union. These are just a couple passages I love of John, some of my favorite things. Well and good if all things change, Lord God, provided we are rooted in you. And this one, when evening comes, you will be examined in love. Learn to love as God desires to be loved and abandon your own ways of acting. Enter within yourself and work in the presence of your bridegroom, who is ever present, loving you. And I know that we'll have some time for questions or comments or reactions, but I did ask Charles to come back one last time. And since Charles, I'm bringing Charles on the camera, I have to show Charles with his beloved, with Baba, holding the car open for Baba at the center in 1958.
No, that's a happy memory right there. I did want to say that about this one more thing about Baba taking away. It is very challenging, I think, for people, especially if they haven't experienced Baba. When you talk about this or you mention it, and of course, I wouldn't myself ever say to anyone who's suffering that, well, it's for the best, well, because what do I know? That's for Baba to say, and then each person discover within themselves. And also one notices that when that family came to Baba with the ill family member, Baba didn't say, well, yeah, this is for your good. Baba consoled them, showed them love, gave her something to do. Yeah. And even more than that, Baba suffers with us, in us, through us. After all, he is us. And Baba says that his suffering is because of himself being bound in us, because we are ignorant of him as our true self. That's his suffering. And that's the real suffering. So all suffering that we experience or that we see in the world today is him suffering. He's not giving people suffering or taking it away. And that helps, I think, people get a better feel, at least, whether they believe it or not, for what Baba is saying when he talks about taking away. Yes, we know that if we stay with him, if we hold on to him, we will lose everything. He promises that. And we are doing it, holding on, because he has given that to us. It's a gift from him. Otherwise, who would volunteer to do that? It's only when we're ready and he gives us the gift that we do enter this dark night of the soul with Baba. And he does strip away, even when we don't know he's stripping away. That's the beauty of life with Baba. He doesn't always let us know, but he's doing it every day in some way, until finally we are naked before God. As they said in the New Life, Erich told me every day in Gujarati, which I can't say, they said, even God fears the naked. And so everything in our life with Baba, I can say that now because I'm not talking about a person or suffering of a particular person, but just, I would say that Baba gives us this wonderful truth that everything in our lives that happens to us, everything is a gift. And it's only by grace can we begin to see everything as a gift, even the hardest of things. And one of the companions in my life that has helped me to come to that awareness of everything as a gift is John of the Cross. John of the Cross. How wonderful we have companions. Of course, it's a narrow path and we enter that narrow lane alone ultimately, but Baba gives us companionship through these great souls, not just Mondly people, but through time, who help us. So some years ago, and many years now, I had the idea to send Mani this little book of, well, it's actually a flip chart of quotes of St. John of the Cross. And there's also one of St. Teresa of Avila. And so, if you want to, one can put it on one's desk or whatever. And then each day there's a new quote or inspiration or whatever. So I thought Mani would really like this, I thought. Didn't really know what she knew or didn't know about John of the Cross or St. Teresa for that matter. But anyway, I sent them to her. And then I didn't think of it for a long time. And then more years later, I was looking at a tape of Mani speaking in Mondley Hall. Someone had taped this and eventually it got on YouTube like everything else. And there she was, and she brought out this little flip chart that I had sent her so long ago. And she said that I had sent it to her and how much she loved it and how beautiful it was. And then she read out some of the quotes from St. John of the Cross. And it made me very happy because imagine one of the very closest of the close companions. I mean, who was closer except Mara than Mani? Receiving inspiration from this great saint. What a wonderful thing. So here are a few of the things, just a few, that are in this little book that Mani read out. Think nothing else, but that God ordains all. And where there is no love, put love, and you will draw out love. I love that. Think nothing else but that God ordains all. Because even when we begin to think that, we become more and more aware that everything is his gift, because everything is his will. And what does his will work out to be? That we become him through love. Another one, the soul that walks in love neither rests nor grows tired. That's beautiful. Now that is a good summary of life with Baba, you know. Baba doesn't, you never stop, Baba never stops working with you, and there's no rest for the weary or the wicked, but you don't grow tired. Another one, like the bee that sucks honey from all the wildflowers and will not use them for anything else, the soul easily extracts the sweetness of love from all the things that happen to her. That is, she loves God in them. Thus, everything leads her to love. It has come to me only late in life with Baba, just how many opportunities that we have each day to show love, to make someone happy, even if they don't know it. And that's when one is happy, is when that happens, when we do that. And we have opportunities all day long. My wonderful friend Jake Lawton was telling me through texting this week about graduation at his school. He teaches high school. And it's a bittersweet day because he has to say goodbye to the students and that he cares about and has taught. But you know what he does every year at graduation? I don't think he'd mind me saying. As each one of them receives his or her diploma, he says Baba's name. And I thought, yes, that's such a lovely way to take advantage of an opportunity. Baba is there within them, but to take an opportunity to share in Baba's work by saying his name to each one. So beautiful, inwardly. Since this is the last one I'll share. Since you know now that your beloved lives hidden within your heart, strive to be really hidden with him. And you will embrace him within you and experience him with loving affection. Jai Baba. Oh, you're going to come next. Okay.
Well, Jay Bob, everyone, I promised to put a link to the poems in the chat. So I'm gonna do that. Yeah. Where's the chat, Charles? Here it is. There we go. So that link I just put in, it's just the Google Drive link that'll take you to that same PDF that I was reading from the poems. Yeah.
So you're going to take questions?
Yes, Christopher, I was wondering, do you feel
Sure,
open?
sure. Yeah, of course. If anybody wants to say anything, please.
All right, well, let's ask you to raise your hand digitally since we have a group here. There are a couple of questions in the chat. Let's see.
There's one you missed.
Oh, well, here, I've got, okay, we've got some hands now, so I'll start with Eugene, and then we can get to chat. Eugene?
Sure.
Yeah, I take this as to be a Baba reference to St. John, but I don't know, it might not be. On page 44 of God Speaks, talking about the fourth plane, Baba writes, at this stage, the soul experiences, as it were, a state of the darkest night.
Wow.
He finds himself caught up between the devil and the deep. The overpowering incitement by intense desires to wield and use this infinite energy at will proves a treacherous foe at this juncture, when the involution of consciousness of this subtle conscious human soul is unfailingly progressing rapidly towards gaining mastery over all desires.
That's fascinating. Yeah. So maybe so. Maybe that's Baba's echo of John. Yeah. And in both John and Baba with that passage, this is about like a pivotal transformational moment. Yeah, a threshold moment. That's great. Thank
Yeah.
you.
And there is so much, let's say, temptation in the journey for John. Yes, so much the world keeps pulling you back, and so yes, that echoes so many themes.
Yeah, for sure.
That's wonderful.
That's
Well,
great.
thank you for finding that
Yeah.
for us.
A pleasure.
Yeah, there are these people who know all these things in Baba so well. That's wonderful.
I was just looking at questions in the chat. If Mary Magdalene is considered the beloved of Jesus, is Mary Magdalene considered the beloved of Jesus? If so, why is Mary the primary female figure in the Catholic tradition? This is something I've wondered about too, that in Jesus's advent, who was the Mara, who was the beloved role? That, you know, for Krishna it was Radha, for Jesus, which was it? And Mary Magdalene is the first person that Jesus appears to when he's resurrected. And he consoles her, you know, in her grief, which seems so much like Baba and Mara. And then she goes and tells other people about it. But yet I think there are also references to Mary as being the kind of counterpart to Jesus. And what I think of is, you all know that dream that Mani had. You all know that wonderful book she did of her dreams of Baba, and that dream she had where she saw blue light coming out of one of the trees on the Meherazad Road, and there was a cavity in the tree trunk. And she looked in and she saw an image of the Virgin Mary there, but then Mary transformed into Mara. And it kept going back and forth between Mary and Mara, Mary and Mara, so that there was a shared identity, which has always suggested to me that at least she saw Mary as Jesus's Mara. Well,
And she would probably know.
yeah.
Well, yes, I mean, it's a fascinating thing, you know, because Mary Magdalene, one would, yes, from the story, you know, but one would think, and of course, Mary was the mother of Jesus, very different role, but I think the women Mondley just said, I mean, assumed that it was Mary, the mother of Jesus, who was the beloved of Jesus. I think that was just, and from what I gathered, I don't think they ever mentioned Mary Magdalene as being that, right?
I think so too.
Yeah, I think so. So, but I can't remember any place where Baba actually talked about that.
We might have to
Supposed
write to David Finster.
Yeah.
Oh, good idea.
I just did that yesterday, so I've got a
So
little
let's,
time.
I was gonna say, I don't think we should be volunteering David's. So he will, David will not be happy with us.
Well,
I'm-
it's
I'm gonna-
in the side, it's in the sidebar of Mara Mayher.
Yes, yes.
Is it?
Yeah, but I, when.
Oh, there you go.
I-
It is. It's so it's,
Yeah,
and,
I
and,
mean, and also, and people say, well, Eric said, and I thought, I'm not going to accept this from the mouth of any man, So it's interesting. Fred Stankus, just he was leaving Amerizad, and Aliba's ringing the bell, and aboard. He saw Mara, and he said, Mara, were you same as the Blessed Mother? But he said, yes, I was. And I thought, in a sense, Fred's innocent, because he bowed down to her when he first met her. His 6'5" flattened out, and Mara says, no, only for Baba. But Goher patted him on the back and said, that's all right, Freddie, just get up. I mean, when you make a 6'5" mistake, it's a big mistake.
Right.
But anyway, and when I asked that question, because when I saw that in the sidebar, I says, no way, come on, no way. Not to criticize Mary Magdalene, but interestingly enough, as tales go, they says, well, she bore children with Jesus, and on, and you hear all these things. So I think there's always that second role of the woman, like Mani had the second role. She got to interface with the men.
Yes.
Special role. And really basically Mara didn't have to do it.
Yeah.
Wouldn't want to do it. I mean, she was too focused,
Totally.
Anyway, I thought of one thing about Christopher, you were saying about how Teresa of Avila had to keep it kind of undercover about, this strong interaction with Juan de la Cruz. And I think that's very interesting because of norms of the day. She was who she was, saying what she felt, and okay, that's patriarchy then. And I will say patriarchy now, I've caught a hint of it. Whereas Baba said he spoke through Norina, and yet I really feel the patriarchy about it. Like, oh, yeah, he said that. Yeah. And it's very interesting because in people, like I've always been very interested in whatever, 40 messages. So one time there were 80 messages, but his speaking through her, because I was very depressed at a certain time. And those messages, beyond my depression, I could see the light. And that's really seeing the light as far as I'm concerned, And it's like, but the messages that came through at the blue bus time, whoa. And they're all in print. At the Mayor Baba journals. And I thank God for them, because the manifest doesn't look like the manifestation is going to be quite painful. I mean, I'm not borrowing worry, but it doesn't look like it's going to be a smooth journey into the new humanity. Anyway, I feel like a patriarchal sort of thing, because for the most part, men don't come to our meeting when we share the messages. And And I'm very alert to it because I check the list because I want to know, because Baba says women will become more easily because of their makeup.
Yeah.
But that's not every man, of course, But anyway, I just needed to
Thank
say
you,
that.
Rosalie. Yeah. Thank you so much. Well, sometimes we should do a Baba Zoom about all the ways that Baba has tinkered with and fractured gender roles. Yeah. Now, some other hands raised here. Who's
Judy.
next? Judy.
Judy.
You're muted, Judy.
Yeah, I think I'm not muted now.
There you go.
I want to thank you both, but especially Christopher, for this incredible presentation. It went straight to my heart, like the arrow into Saint Teresa's heart. That the way that you were able to so naturally connect the story of St. John of the Cross and of Teresa to our lives today, our lives for most of us the last 40 years plus, with beloved Baba. And I did not know much about St. John of the Cross. I grew up in a Protestant church, but really, your presentation was so beautiful, insightful, and inwardly changing for me by what you were sharing. And then, of course, Charles' contributions also very straight to the heart. And that's what I love. It's not up in the head. It's like taking this life that, as I really appreciate learning, learning how difficult St. John of the Cross's life was, and that is Baba's and Christ's loving prasad to him, as all our difficulties, as we perceive them, are his prasad for us to finally bring us to realize that we were never anything other than him. But you did such a beautiful job. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Judy. That is so sweet. It's such a privilege to get to talk about these things with all of you. I mean, it really just gives me such joy to exchange ideas like this. So thank you.
Jill, I believe, is next.
Yes, for both Charles and Christopher, I do have a question, but something Rosalie said has brought up something I'm going to say first. As I told both of you years ago, before she passed away, Kitty asked me to write a book about Baba's work with women. And I almost said no. I couldn't imagine a Baba lover with a lack of self-confidence equal to mine. I had no confidence in my ability to do it. And it really has slowed me down, although I'm writing the third draft. And so what Rosalie was saying is something that, after 3 decades of thought, I've really come to believe we need to honor the so-called male patriarchy. It was an age of reason. And when you guys talk, you use that reason that souls in male form are gifted with. And it really brings out so many aspects of, like, Saint Teresa and John of the Cross. And of course, if a woman were to talk about it, we'd be a little different. We tend to kind of draw things together more intuitively. But I just appreciate the ability of both of you to present your, wide knowledge and experience in ways that are both intuitive and also very organized and reasonable, so that we can follow them. And so, you know, I have really come to honor the 2,000-year age of reason, that even though it's been out of balance and things are getting in balance now, that it really gives a strength to cope with all the emotions and intuitions that are being released and can cause a lot of confusion. And on that part, here's my question, which I'm finally getting to. I'm sorry. One of my thoughts is that I noticed that Kitty and Elizabeth never appeared on a stage in the meeting house whenever I was there. I never saw them come up and give a talk. I also noticed that it's mostly the men who travel around and who do talk about Baba. You know, and Erich was the one who was host in Mondley Hall. And we women were mostly back on the veranda by the home. And Moni would sometimes help Erich. But there does seem to be a difference even with Baba. And that the women, Delia, Kitty, others, they never forced themselves out. When they were asked to talk, they would, but their talks were also tended to be more personal in a way. And I just, do you have a comment on that you feel comfortable? And did they talk very much in the meeting place?
No, I think you're right. Elizabeth was not at all inclined to speak before an audience. She didn't like doing it. She gave a talk at her church because they asked her about Baba and so forth, but that was very, very rare. She would participate in some of the center programs, but very briefly. She did talk to my students when I brought a group of students there. I think she was doing it as a courtesy, a favor to me. And I could tell that she was not exactly happy to be sitting there talking. So yes, I think that was her personality. At the same time, of course, about women's roles, she ran the center. So
Right.
a man didn't run it, and really until Buzz, there were only women, in charge at Baba's home. So there we are.
Right.
In terms of leadership in the West, women have been the leaders, and but you're right about public speaking, and I think that's way down on the list of I say so because that's what I do, way down the list of valuable things to do for Bob. But if you're called to do it, you do it. But Elizabeth was called the greater things. Kitty did more of that. She may have been on a panel or two in the meeting place, but the only time that she and Elizabeth actually gave a talk that I can recall is when they did it together in the library after they returned from one of their trips to India. And somehow people persuaded them to come and talk about their experience there. And there is a recording of it, and it's quite wonderful. It's very funny because they go back and forth, and at one point Elizabeth gets a little frustrated and wants to get her point in, and Kitty was holding the stage, and so, yeah, it's a wonderful sort of insight into their relationship, and yes, it's beautiful. But I don't remember them doing that, but the once, and Kitty, though, of course, was a public speaker by choice. She enjoyed it, and she was more formal in her talks than almost any public speaker of Baba. I mean, I think, I work very hard to prepare what I'm going to say, and then I give it to Baba and hope that I get out of the way. That's my thing. Kitty worked very, very hard on her talks, but she was very meticulous about what she was going to say, every word chosen. So when she went to a gathering, for example, I went with her one gathering, and my talks were more stories and those kinds of things, because that's where I feel most comfortable sharing Baba. Hers was more a theme, a almost theological or philosophical theme about Baba. It was very interesting, very much a brilliant mind. People don't quite think of Kitty as doing that, but when she did have the opportunity to prepare a talk, that's what she did. And fortunately, after she went to Baba, Wendy and Buzz had the good idea to pull together some of her most wonderful talks that she wrote and delivered over the years and to a book. And so we have it. It's called One Fine Thread, which is a reference to one of the talk that we love the best in the book about consciousness. It is a brilliant, in my view, a brilliant talk that one can learn so much from about Baba. Kitty was quite the thinker, right? People don't remember quite that way because of the interaction and how, how she was with people, they don't, and how she was a servant for all. She was serve. So you don't think of her as in there, working in this way, this extremely thoughtful way of thinking about Baba. So if you have not seen that book or you don't have those talks, I tell you, it's really, really a very wonderful book, don't you think? Yeah.
Charles, one of the things that Kitty told me was, because people see her, with her socializing, but she said that really one of her favorite times were when she could be by herself and read and think and write and listen to music. And of course, that was to encourage me, with writing this book. And but it showed a side of her that she must have spent hours by herself growing up to know music.
Yes, yes.
I love what you just said. Thank you. It really helps confirm where my mind's going.
We have Elizabeth next.
Well, I wanted to follow up with the question about Mary Magdalene and the Virgin Mary, Mother of Jesus, as the beloved. And one of the things that, and I'm not Catholic, I just have to say that, but my brother and his whole family is. What I find hard is the role, because you don't think, well, I wouldn't think of the mother as the beloved, because I guess in my humanness associate the beloved with the love partner of somebody instead of the mother. And I think that at least is why it's confusing to me. And of course, we've heard the zillion stories about Mary Magdalene and that whole thing, from the Da Vinci Code and, and King Arthur and the Holy Grail and all of that. And who knows if any of that is true or not. But in any case, if you find out anything about that, I would be very interested in learning and trying to understand. Of course, it probably shouldn't make a difference who the beloved is. We know he had one. And
Right.
And then I wanted to say that just like St. John of the Cross was diminutive, so was Narayan Maharaj. He was only like 4 feet something, and his shoe size was like that of a child, like a 4 or 5-year-old. It was so petite. And then Charles, I wanted something that you said really stunned me, but I can't remember what it is. It was like an oxymoron. No, I'm hoping somebody will trigger it, but it was when you were talking about St. John of the Cross and the proclamation that Baba read out. And you had a line in there, and it was very short. And I thought, what? And I don't do that often, but I wish. It stuck out.
Do you mean the vehicle of light is darkness?
Yes. Thank
It is,
you.
and it is darkness that establishes the existence of light.
That stumped me. What is that?
Uh, what do you mean? Something
Can you
Baba.
explain that
Oh,
better
what
so
do you
I can
think?
try to understand?
Well, as far as I can gather it, that it is, let's put it in the larger picture of Maya or illusion. Baba dedicates, as you know, God speaks
Right.
to illusion that to the illusion that sustains reality. If there wasn't for illusion, obviously, for the nothing that comes out of the everything would never know it is everything.
True.
So I think that's what's behind this statement of Baba, that light only is known if it only can experience itself as light, if you will, or we can only experience the existence of light in this world, in this illusion. And so that's the larger picture, but I think what St. John of the Cross is saying, that in this world, in our experience, we experience the true light, the divine light, when we enter into darkness. So not only is the nothing Baba's comparing to the darkness, but John is saying, see it as darkness, experience it as darkness, then you will see the light. In other words, we don't experience illusion as darkness, do we? I mean, I shouldn't speak for you, but I mean, to me, you know, it seems very real. And you know, I have this I want to, I'm going to do this. And Baba says, well, you know, that is all illusion and it isn't real. And so John is saying the same thing. He's saying, you know, as long as we hold on to these things in our life as being light, you know, yeah, it's light. I can see there's trees and so forth. And as long as we hold on to that, then we won't see the light. So until we see this that we call light as darkness, the real light will not be visible to us or experienced by us. So I think that's behind what Baba is saying here too. Yeah.
Well, thank you. That's great. And I think I'm going to have Baba's grace before I can do that, because
well, no, he says that. He says, no, you can't do it. And that's the wonderful thing about life with Baba that I've always felt, and that is that we don't do anything. That we can't do anything. And when we are going to be God realized is already preordained. There's nothing we can do to make it faster or quicker or whatever. And we're free. We're free. We don't have anything to worry about because he is doing it all. If we remember him, then we distract our mind from thinking that we do it. That's all. It isn't that we do it. By you know, remembering him, that we suddenly stop doing things. It is that we begin through practice of that remembrance to not any longer think we're doing anything. So getting to the point, as Baba said, you know, remembrance of him is our job, and everything else is his job. Everything. Elimination of the ego, we can't do it. You know, get rid of sanskaras or whatever it is. People, you know, worry about this and that, sanskara and that. No, but Baba says, that's why are you doing my job? You know, if you do my wish, don't try to do my job. My wish is that you become more and more aware that everything is my will. Can you do that? Everything is my will, and that will free you. There's nothing, if everything is God's will and it's all been ordained, why worry? We can't change it. We may not like it all the time. You know, we can complain about, you know, that this is what the play is, the script is, but we can't change the script, right? So in other words, there is a liberation in becoming more and more aware there's nothing we can do, and it's all God's will. And that's what I think Baba has given us is one of the most wonderful gifts. But I will say that even for one to do Baba's wish, think when you suffer, Baba wants me to suffer. Think when you're happy, Baba wants that the wish, even to that is a gift. So if I feel prompted to say, oh, I'm going to practice what's in Baba's wish, yeah, I feel prompted, but it's not me. It's because Baba is, it's my time, and we can't. The timing of Baba is so perfect. So one can't say to another person, oh, you should do this, or this is, no, because it's only in that time. And then it's a gift from Baba.
Thank you. And I just want to say one quick thing, and then I'll leave because Jill Davis needs to ask something. Or no, she already did. There's a film about I think it's Mukherjee is leading people up Seclusion Hill, and he shows how Baba led the Mandali, and there's a turn there which he says is like the fourth plane, and he says that's where people have their back to God, and that's when they enter the dark night of the soul. But then when they turn around, then Baba you have to keep holding on to the diamond. When you turn around, that's when you face the light, and you've gone past that. So it's similar to what Eugenio said earlier. And I think Baba does relate it to the treachery or the treacherousness of the fourth plane, and the time when it's so easy to fall back to the stone state.
Yes.
Yeah. And if you do, that's ordained also. No, yeah, if you don't remember Baba at your breathing of your last, that's ordained. I mean, so there's nothing that we can do. So what I've gathered from Baba, and Erich pummeled this into my poor brain, he said, Baba said to us, life with me, what is life with me? Do everything as though everything depends on your actions, and always remember you do nothing. That's life with me. So that's, very, very challenging on one level, but Erich says, no, it's not. You just start doing it. Easy for him to say. But when he took me up Seclusion Hill the first time, it was just after Baba, not long after Baba dropped the body. And, I'd never been up Seclusion Hill. And he stopped at that turn. And he said, whenever we would go with Baba up this hill, this is where he would stop. Yeah. And he would say, look at this. Yeah. From here, after this turn, it appears we're going back down. See that? I said, yes, I see that. Because it kind of turns, and it does. See, you're going backwards. He says, yeah. He says, that's how it is. But Baba says, not to worry, it will take you to the top. That's where it will go, even though it seems like you're going back. So he said, Eric said, Baba's path is no path at all. There's no path with Baba. You don't have to worry about that. Wherever you go, whatever turn, he will take care. It will lead to the top. Yeah. I do want to say something about Mary Magdalene. Did you want to say something about that? No. I mean, just to underscore, I think everybody probably knows what I'm going to say about the beloved of the beloved. Since there is no sexual component, then it sort of changes the possibilities of who can be envisioned, right? So, and I say this because for whatever reason, in was my first trip to India after Baba dropped the body, 71 must be, 71. Mara took me through the house and took me into Baba's bedroom, and just the two of us, which is the only time I was ever alone with her, because there was always someone, Meru or something. But for this, whatever reason, this particular day, she took me in, and nobody followed us. I mean, there were very few people there anyway at the time, pilgrims. But so we went in, and one of the things she wanted to tell me was that she and Baba did not have sexual relations. She said, you should know that. And I think she wanted to be, I mean, it was assumed, but I think she wanted it somehow on record so that people would not misunderstand their relationship. And she told me a long story about Ramakrishna, who was accused of having sexual relations with one of his disciples and so forth, which is a different, I won't tell that whole story. But she told me that story to illustrate that this is what people might think or project. And she said, no, there is not, it was nothing like that. So, I mean, I didn't think there was anyway, but you know. Yeah.
But I'm not sure that changes the Mary Magdalene or Mary thing.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't answer the question. It just changes the notion that you have to have a certain relationship.
Oh, I see. Yeah, certain relationship.
Your mother
Yeah.
relationship would be different.
And I was just gonna say the association of Mary Magdalene with sexuality that people think of today, most biblical scholars would say is actually a concoction that was because of patriarchy, to use that word again. But that if you really look at the scriptures, that what happened is there was a Mary Magdalene who was Jesus's foremost female apostle. And that she is the one who first witnessed the resurrection and then who goes and becomes an apostle to the apostles, right? She goes and she tells the other men that he's risen from the grave. And at first they don't believe her. So it says they came to see for themselves. And it was true, the tomb was empty. And that then the church leaders were uncomfortable with the idea of her being made into this role of being teacher, preacher to the apostles. And so that figure was conflated with the other Marys that are mentioned in the Gospels, the one who washes Jesus's feet and then dries them with her hair, and the one who is a repentant prostitute, that these are probably three different people that became kind of conflated into this one image of Mary Magdalene as the repentant prostitute, you know, who has to constantly atone for her previous life of sin and her association with sexuality. That was a very kind of useful image of womanhood for the patriarchal church to use, but it's probably not historically how it was.
There is really almost no evidence of Mary Magdalene or much about her in the Bible. And as Christopher says, certainly no evidence that the Mary in those other moments was the same as Mary Magdalene. None whatsoever. It's all happened later. I mean, was put together later for whatever reason people had, the church. Yeah.
Well, when Mani in Mara's, that first book of Mara, says, you know, the world cannot understand their relationship because, especially now, it's pretty sex in neon, you know, and you know, it's very interesting to hear that now because, and in a sense, I mean, the love of a mother, if that's withheld, that's more devastating than a lover withholding. Yes. Yeah. So that is really a true love, you know. Yeah, that the mother should have ideally. Yeah. So it's no, I was thinking sometime maybe, because when I was in Los Angeles, now it's over 25 years, but the subject came up because I asked, we were in at Jaco Caraco's parents' house, a big room, and my brother, who's gay, had asked me, what does Baba say about gays? So I posed the question, and people started saying, I couldn't believe it, come to him privately. That's a private. I says, no, I don't feel I'm gay, so why should I come privately? And it was like a tumult. I couldn't believe the reaction, and Donald Muller was there. And someone that says, Rosalie, come privately. And Donald Muller says, no, you should hear this. You should hear this. So he started in a very gracious manner sharing. He says, well, there's been a lot of talk with Anita Bayard, and she said she never heard anything like that when she was with him at that time in Cannes, I guess it was, and it doesn't even sound like Baba, but it was so interesting that, I mean, I thought the group imploded on me. You know, it was like, whoa. And you know, so maybe it's sometime, because Christopher, you said something like that, because now we have liquid sex and different types of, you call them on some level a romantic relationship, that we can have some sort of talk where you and Charles, and you know, it might be helpful.
Sure.
It might be a hornet's nest, but it might be.
That's okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
you know what I mean, because it was a hornet's
Yes,
stand, and you know, I was blown away. I thought, what? You know, and feel the, you know, the push of the crowd, and I thought, wow. And then someone says, we don't have a problem with that in Los Angeles, and I thought, what? I mean, it's universal, you know. It's wow. Anyway, and I want to ask one question about humor, because I think Baba brought incredible humor to this Advent, and it's not accessed as much as other things, and it's like, it's the thing that's going to get us through the whole manifestation. Keep a sense of humor.
Charles
And
gave
I
a
know-
wonderful talk on that, on Baba's humor. You should repeat that.
did I?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, funny anecdotes.
Oh, yeah, I did. That's right.
Is it taped? Is it taped, Charles? Did you?
It must be these days somewhere.
Yeah. We'll have to see if that's on
But
YouTube. Yeah.
no, I think I agree with you so much that, I mean, one thing that leaps to mind about that is that when I was first doing things publicly for Baba at Emory, you know, we had a birthday celebration. I was going to give a talk and so forth. I didn't know what to say. So I wrote to Annie Boo or Elizabeth, and I said, you know, I'm giving this talk, and she wrote back a very sweet letter, this, and then she said, but be sure to mention Baba's humor, because that is so important in understanding Baba. And I tried to, but you know, I think that's right. I think it is kind of assumed and by many of us who know anything about Baba, but I don't think that it's properly in the spotlight, because even in my little time in his physical presence, Baba was always humorous. I mean, he would, any opportunity to make something humorous or turn something to a joke or to do a practical joke, he would take, and very funny. And he loved people to be funny, and he loved Anita for that, because she always made him laugh. And he would interrupt serious discourses in the barn, interrupt them in the middle and say, now let's have a joke. It's too much now. Let's have a joke. And he was playful and humorous all the time. And I think that is probably going to be remembered in the long term as the real mark of this avatar. His personality as a human being was his endless sense of humor.
That'd be good for you, Sahavas.
It would be,
Yeah.
actually good for you, Sal.
I tell you, there's one line, Baba, I think from the Blue Bus Sun. He says, I cannot rest unless I work. When I work, that is my rest. My work is in restlessness.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, Nothing could pass that one. I mean, that,
Yeah.
whoa, yeah. A use of
Thank
language.
you.
Wow.
Betty?
McCall has been waiting patiently here.
Okay.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi,
So
McCall.
first of all,
Hi, good to see
hi.
you again.
Yeah, good to see you. And oh, first of all, it was wonderful. It was so wonderful to hear you, the love coming out of you and your voice. And
thank
yeah, and it so fit the music of your heart, so fit the music of the poems that you read out so beautifully.
Thank you.
And so thank you for this talk and for the connection to the Avila talk, to Teresa of Avila. And about, sorry, but about Mara and Mother Mara and Mara Magdalene. If I remember right, I think that Rain Ismaganet, she heard from Mara herself that she identifies with Mara Magdalene, not with Mother Mara. But you have to ask her, and I think she heard it directly. But actually, in my heart too, I see her as Mary Magdalene and not as Mary. And well, maybe it's easier for me because I'm not Christian. I grew up as a Jew, so I can be unconnected to the stories of, or the feelings towards Mother Mary as being a very central figure. And I do love her very much. And I do think that she's a very central figure, and both of them are. So, so I really see Mara as Mary Magdalene. So I do connect to what Rainey said. And it should be asked, she should be asked, because if I remember right, she asked her.
Who
And
was
she
it?
gave the
Rainy?
Rainy.
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 Oh,
Okay,
okay, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so she had a very close connection to Mara, and I think that she did hear it from her. But that's what I remember, and but if she should be asked. So if she did hear it directly from Mara, then that makes it very clear. But when Mani writes about the tree where she saw the blue light, and she saw that in a place where Mary is, the Mother Mary is, and she saw the interchanging. That doesn't at all make it problematic for me to see that too, as being the purity of this Mary Mother figure and the purity of Mara herself.
Yes. Yes.
So, like I also see Mara and Mani as two different entities, but also as one. As two aspects of the feminine that Baba held next to him. So as I see them as different from each other, an individual, and having different roles and expressing different things, I still see them as a compound of expressing the love and the humor and the creativity together as a female feminine representatives, first, highest female representatives next to Baba. And I was going to say another thing, but I don't now remember what. So I don't remember.
I think it's wonderful what you say,
Yes.
and just to add a word on that, that you might want to add Erich, what Baba asked Erich. I mean, because from the cross, as I remember the scripture, Jesus asked his beloved disciple John to care
For his mother.
mother,
Yes.
and so you remember you just were reading this.
Oh,
Erich.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
We were reading in Heather's wonderful biography of Mani. Heather is writing about the Mani and Erich relationship, and Erich revealed to Heather that Baba had asked him after I dropped my body, you have to promise that you will take care of Mara and Mani.
Mara and Mani.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
because
yeah.
Papa always treated them like that, as
Yeah.
the two, you know, women in his circle who are closest to him. Yeah.
And if you hear the cousins of the Rustam and the twins, if they come to the samadhi,
Yeah.
they say Mara Mani, you know, they say
Yeah.
Mara Mani.
Yeah.
And actually
Mara-
I do, and actually I do too, because I feel more connected to Mara, because that was the greatest impression of my first visits, was her being and godhood and her inner connection, in a reaching out to me. She was just amazing. And so I have this great connection, and I connect to her mainly, but I can't say her name. I can say her name and connect to her, but then I have to say Mara Mani. I feel that Baba wants me to not separate between them, not just see them as one. And now I remember what I wanted to say about her purity, about Mara's purity. What is so beautiful, so very, very beautiful, that Baba did, and was very hard for him and also for her, that she was never left alone, never ever left alone. There wasn't a minute that she was alone, even when she went to the toilet. And he was he was never alone. 24/7 he had people around him. So there was only one very small second that they had alone, that is told about in the morning, when the night watchman would go out and the women would be ready to come in. They would let Mara come in for one, I don't know, maybe 2 minutes, just to say hello intimately to her beloved, and he to have this minute with her. So they didn't have even time to do, I mean, who would dream? I mean, who can say that they had time for anything else, but just to, and I just had a photo sent from a film of Mara and with Baba, and you can see the intimate moments that they had were always when people were around them, but they had this intimate connection. And you could see the eyes and the sparkles and the special intimacy woven between them too, even in the midst of all that, because that's all they had. I mean, that's one of the sacrifices that he gave. He couldn't dance, he couldn't sing, he couldn't have a beloved of his own for his own, and she neither either. And I must say that there was one thing that I see about Eruch, that he was the mother figure. He took care of Baba like a mother took care of Baba. He took care of him.
That's what Mani called him.
Oh, yeah?
Nickname was the nickname Mama
Chucha?
Mama Chicha, something like that. It was her teasing name for him because he was always like mothering them and nagging them and do this, like that. Yeah. So that's funny.
So
Mani taught him the same way.
So maybe he was Mother Mary.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe
But
so.
but I don't see even in any conflict also with Mara having the both characters woven together. But I still, I wouldn't want to see incest, so naturally the mother is always the first one the child loves. If it's lucky, that's by Freud. And so so she can be the beloved, but the next beloved, the true beloved, is the one that shines in the heart after that. And I think that, so thank you, Jay Papa. And thank you, Christopher. Your talks are just so beautiful. And we're so lucky that Charles pushed you to do that. I think, he prodded you to do that, and more, we want more. So
thank you.
Thank you, both of you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Eugene, I'm going to jump in just with a question of my own. I want to briefly, Christopher, to talk about the context of the times. Was that Inquisition time when they were?
It was Inquisition time. It was a very dangerous time for Teresa, especially because a few things. One is because of the restrictions on women that I was just talking about, and especially she was held in great suspicion um, for a lot of reasons. One is because she's writing books that do delve into theological discourse, and that was the purview of men. And there's been some really good scholarship in recent decades that analyzes how Teresa succeeded in what she was doing. And part of it is through her use of language, that she uses self-deprecating language to disarm her critics. And that she is actually talking about pretty sophisticated theological ideas, but that she will undercut it by saying things like, well, what do I know? I'm just a weak woman and I should really leave this to the men to talk about. And that she develops a writing style that is meant to be an imitation of what men perceive to be women's chatter. And so that some of the very qualities that Teresa's writing is praised for as being spontaneous, lively, is actually a kind of rhetorical strategy, so that she sounds like a woman, and a very, very humble and self-deprecating woman. So the gender piece was a big issue. Another piece was that the Inquisition was on the hunt for a heretical sect that were called the Alumbrados. And the Alumbrados were a group who claimed to have direct experience of God through mystical experience that could bypass the Catholic sacraments or the Catholic hierarchy. And so that, this is during the period when the Catholic Church is trying to battle the spread of Protestantism and to unite all of Spain under one banner of Catholicism. And so when they have a group who seem to be questioning some of the norms of the Catholic Church, that is an offense that's worthy of torture or even execution by the Inquisition. And Teresa's writings were sometimes accused of having these alumbrado tendencies. She was not that, but some critics perceived her as that. And then the other big problem, of course, for Teresa is that she's from a Jewish family. And so we know now from archival records that Teresa's grandfather was convicted by the Inquisition for maintaining Jewish practices at a time, decades after Jews had been given the ultimatum to either convert to Catholicism or leave Spain, right? So Judaism is strictly forbidden. And Teresa's grandfather was forced to march in a penitential procession along with Teresa's father, who was a little boy, to admit to their secret Judaism. And so that's why the family moved to Avila from Toledo to try to start a new life for themselves after this humiliating punishment. Teresa almost certainly knew that she was from Jewish lineage. And one of the things that's very interesting about her is that when she founded her convents, she overturned the requirement of purity of blood. And so other convents and monasteries would only take people who could prove that they came from what was called Old Christian lineage, right? Without any so-called taint of Jewish blood, that was like a litmus test for becoming a monk or a nun. And Teresa eliminated that requirement for women who wanted to join her communities. And so it's pretty clear now that a lot of the families who were sending their daughters to join Teresa's reform were converso families. They were Jewish families. Or converted Jews. And some of her main patrons apparently were also converted Jews. So yeah, it was a very, very problematic time to be, a woman descended from Jews who wants to take on traditionally male roles, who is having visions and hearing voices speaking to her when, she could be suspected of demonic possession or secret Judaism, all kinds of stuff. So
Yeah.
it's amazing. It's a testament to her skill as a thinker and a strategist that she achieved what she believed God was asking her to achieve. Yeah.
What was the church's problem with John? His ecstasy, his person, John of the Cross. I mean, why did they imprison him? What
Yeah. Well,
was
the problem there is really with internal Protestant politics within the order. So it wasn't the Catholic Church's problem. It was the problem that John was seen as being this radical reformer by a lot of Carmelite monks who didn't want to be reformed. And so they objected to how the order was changing. And then later in his life, leadership within the order was really trying to take it in a different direction than where John needed to go. And they really thought of John as a thorn in their side. So, he was often just someone who was on the margins and persecuted for being on the margins.
Okay.
But he was not considered a problematic figure in terms of, like, he didn't have all the things going against him that Teresa had.
Yeah.
Did they object to his sort of ecstatic, experiences of? Did they feel that he was, what's the word, taking on,
No, because for men, that's okay. It's women who are the ones who are so susceptible to demonic possession in that worldview, right? That men are always saying, all women are like Eve. Eve is the one who accepted the fruit from the serpent and then talked Adam into eating the fruit. And so it's all these women who are claiming to have visions that are being seduced by the devil. But, we trust men that, that's not you. We'll give you the benefit of the doubt.
Thank you. Okay. Eva's got a hand up. Eugene, I'll get to you, but you've had one question already. Eva.
What I thought of when you were mentioning the women having demonic possession, I guess we could all ask Saint Joan of Arc about that, right?
Exactly. Yes. Right.
Because, and I'm kind of curious about how Teresa never really got into trouble with the Inquisition, just because of all the for different thinking.
She did. She got turned into the Inquisition twice. She was fortunate, though, that she had cultivated friendships with powerful elites who came to her rescue, and also the King of Spain, King Philip II, greatly admired Teresa and helped her. So she had the right friends in high places to get her out of a tough jam. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was curious, did she ever see John again after he got out of the hospital?
Let's see. That's a great question. I don't know that she ever would have, because their travels took them to very different places after that. Because she never went to Granada, where he was prior. I don't know. I'll have to look, but I think you're right. That may have been it. Yeah.
Thank you. And I just wanted to mention that I read a very interesting book on Mary Magdalene years ago, and the title is Holy Blood, Holy Grail. It was written by some reporters from the BBC. It's really interesting. So
interesting.
There's a free PDF online if anyone's interested.
Holy Blood, Holy Grail. Yeah.
Holy Blood, Holy Grail. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
So very interesting.
Thank you. Jay Bob.
And now Eugene.
Oh, thanks, Betty. Christopher, I think I read that that John had converso ancestors as well.
That's very possible. Yes, and especially of his mother's association with weaving. Converso families were often involved in the cloth trade and cloth manufacturing, so that's possible.
And Charles, that was such a good reminder that that the relationship of Baba and Mara was a pure one, pure in the sense of no lust in it, no sex in it, and probably lacking greed and the other one too, anger. Yeah. So that's quite a relationship, really. I mean, we call it in the West platonic, but that somehow doesn't really give the flavor of love.
Yes.
Divine, right?
Yeah.
And wasn't you Gospels experts should know, would know this better than me. Doesn't one or more of the Gospels say that 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 one of the disciples, John, was Jesus's beloved, that he was frequently, embraced or cuddled by Jesus.
Yes, a beloved apostle. Yes.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, he's always been considered the beloved apostle, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so tying in what you were saying, Charles, about pure love, it doesn't need to be a female.
That's right.
Right.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And gosh,
And indeed, I mean, pictures of Baba loving men has always been really something, just the sweetness and
Absolutely. So the male mandali and then also the musts
and also
and the pictures of the intimacy of Baba with Muhammad or Ali Shah.
Yeah.
Remarkable.
especially the musts. Yeah,
Yeah.
Those are especially.
Dr. Donkin,
And Duncan, yeah.
Donkin and Baba, were so close, or Gustaji Baba's shadow.
Gustaji, yeah.
Yeah. But I want to say about the
About John.
Mary Magdalene. But it'll come back to me.
Okay.
No, I was thinking that in 1958, Mother read out to Baba in the lagoon cabin. In fact, it was arranged that this would be read out to Baba from Cahill Gibran's book about Jesus, that in each chapter has a different biblical disciple giving their story of Jesus. Or no, Pilate is in there too, so it's not just disciples. Anyway, different perspectives in the imagination of Cahill Gibran. And so Mary Magdalene's chapter, and it was arranged to be read out to Baba in the lagoon cabin. And Elizabeth, I think, had the idea that she was going to read it. And Mother had the idea that she was going to read it. And so there was a little bit of a, back and forth and between these two people who are very close, but as to who was read it. Anyway, Mother was somehow she read it. And at the end, and it's about Mary Magdalene seeing Jesus for the first time. And at first seeing him as a man that was attractive and so forth, and then how she saw him in a deeper way. So just a beautiful little chapter of Gibran's imagination of what that might have been like. And he associated that character with Mary Magdalene, which, as we know, is speculation. Anyway, after Mother read it, Mother was an actress, so she read it very beautifully, I'm told. I wasn't in the room. After she read it, Baba, he said, "Jane, the way you have read this has touched my heart very much." He said, "For you see, Jane, I was Jesus." It was so beautiful. I never heard something quite like that, so direct. So that was such a profound experience for my mother, because you could say she lived a life that people would say was Mary Magdalene, before Jesus, a life that, worldly and full of all these things that people now say are sinful. And so that experience of reading all of that, of reading that story out to Baba, and then Baba saying how much he loved the way she read it, just lifted something from her about her past. And she realized, as she later said, Baba's the only man who ever loved me, not in spite of who I am, but because of who I am. Yeah.
Then Wendy read that at her memorial service.
And then Wendy read out that same passage at my mother's memorial service. That's right. Yeah.
Beautiful,
Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah. I mean, um, mm, it's such a beacon to think of people loving each other the way Baba loved us.
Yes. Oh, and Eugene, you made me think of this, and this is what I wanted to say because of what you were saying. Mara, we could say, just looking at the story, was shaped all those decades by Baba to be the pure lover in a way that is almost unimaginable. So it's already been mentioned how she was never alone, but it's also that everything was created around her to keep her one-pointed focus on Baba until finally it was like breathing. It was like breathing. And after Baba dropped the body, of course, it was there. It was no need to isolate her or all those things that she went through. And Mani was assigned the task for a period. How many years? A few years?
I don't know.
Baba assigned Mani the task of writing down every day everything Mara did. I mean, not just generally, but everything that happened, moment to moment, and Mani filled volumes with this, and she destroyed them all except for one to keep as an example because she didn't really, I don't know, she didn't really feel this was appropriate for, I don't know what her reason for public.
People wouldn't understand.
People would not understand this, but what I'm getting to is that how Baba worked with Mara, all that to make her purity and her one-pointedness so that she became the ideal lover. And I've always felt that in that sense, Mara represented all of us who want to be his lover. She, through Baba's work with her, he paved the way for us to be lovers of the beloved. So it wasn't her that did it. It was Baba who shaped her to do it.
Yeah, and it seemed like she was a natural for it, though, too, Charles. That she wanted to do that.
Oh, absolutely. She did.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to
She
say.
had early rivals too. She did. Others wanted that too.
I wonder if another way to put it would be that all those restrictions facilitated what she already wanted to do and knew was her
Yeah,
role.
but even that was a gift.
It's a gift.
That she wouldn't have wanted unless Baba had given her that gift. The prompting. We don't come to that except through grace. I mean, to go into that life, it's like Erich leaving everything and going to Baba. He would not have done that. He would say himself that he would not, that was not his, but Baba didn't say you have to do it. Baba just simply said, will you, on May 21st, 1938, he called Erich and he said, can you leave everything, the estates, all that stuff, and your engineering future career, all that, can you just leave that and come be with me? And Erich was, in his mind, he couldn't think what to say. But what popped out was, by your grace, Baba, anything is possible. And then Baba said, fine, come in a month. So that's how it was. Baba gave him that and gave Mara that role.
Yes.
Yeah. And others wanted it. But she got it.
Yeah, it was so funny in that Erich was kind of like tried to avoid Baba just prior to that, because he wanted to have his teenage fun.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. What a life. What a life. Well,
found it in the book. I wanted
Oh,
to
good.
find it in, it's in volume 1 of Mara Mayher. It says, Saint Baba also clarified later that the beloved of Jesus Christ was not the Virgin Mary, but Mary Magdalene.
oh,
Well, I
Where is
disagree.
that?
I disagree.
that?
That's volume 1. It doesn't say, it says Baba clarified, but I would need that clarified.
Volume 1 of what?
Volume 1 of Mara Mayher.
Oh, thank
And
you.
I will say this, about the that big kerfuffle about that I encountered about gayness, and it's because of that Hermes, when he printed Lord Mayher, all the volumes, has on the he put keynote things at the top of pages, and it was minimization of homosexual lust. Whereas it was certainly minimization of lust. I just think it
Right.
was a bit of someone's bias slipping in there,
Yeah.
it looks like.
yeah. But at anyway, that was the keynote of it, and it reminded me.
David Spencer can clarify all this.
Yeah.
No, he can't clarify it. No, no.
Wendy
No,
had
but anyway, these are interesting things that,
Absolutely.
and,
Yeah.
and it's funny, Krista, because that's where I went to that. I thought, Baba, I want to know this. I don't want to,
Yeah.
I don't want to hear it from a man, So,
Good.
so it was Imani's dream book, that
Yes.
grotto, and I knew, just the I was just reading here, and it's saying that Baba said that they were not to speak of Jesus's crucifixion in front of Mara.
Mhm.
She do not do it. And I thought, how would that be, especially for a mother, to have her son crucified? And it's like, that says it to me. It's like, it's not that we just we want to think, it's a great romance. It's a difficult romance.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
lover, the beloved, that's my favorite thing, that it says it all. But wow, how it can go slanted, this sex, that sex, But I will say one other thing, that after Narina Machiavelli met Meher Baba in Harmon on Hudson, 1931, she wrote him a letter like, are you the same that's been speaking to me? Are you the same that's been speaking to me? And Baba says, yes. And this is in the archives and files. Yes, I'm the same. Do not share it now. Don't share it with anyone yet. Don't share yet. So it wasn't until the blue bus time that it was coming out, and he wanted it published. And when he wanted it published, he wanted Noreen and Elizabeth to start this Mayor Baba Journals, and he says, Baba, no one's going to read it unless you put something in it. So he started putting the first discourse he put in Avatar.
Yes. Thank you,
Yeah.
Rosalie. Now, we should probably wrap up soon, but
There's
is there
several
anybody who
people
hadn't
waiting.
gotten a chance to ask a question who wants to do it before we say
Several
goodbye?
people,
Ralph has not had a chance. Ralph?
My question's pretty kind of a far rabbit hole. So someone may have a critical burning question.
Well, Wendy had a hand up for some time. Wendy, are you there? She's not showing. So if you want to.
My question was to be quick, and no one has to respond.
There's Wendy.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll come back to you, Ralph.
Okay.
Sorry, I have a husband. I have to.
Oh,
feed.
good.
I'm so sorry. all I wanted to say was, first of all, thank you. And second of all, I think and I can only speak for myself, is I think every time I get to experience love, it's such a gift. And it doesn't matter if it's with a man or a woman or a tree or a puppy or that I have the capacity to feel. Wow. Like, to me, that's so exciting. And it increases the longing to want it even more.
Yes. Yes.
And that's
Absolutely.
all, nothing more. Thank you.
Beautiful.
That's everything. Thank you, Wendy.
Well said. And now Ralph.
Somewhere in my lifetime with Baba, a breeze went by in a conversation, and someone suggested that perhaps Mara may have been one of the 5 perfect masters. No, not Mara. Mary, the mother of Jesus, may have been one of the 5 perfect masters. And I thought, well, and then I thought, I was quite a bit older when I discovered that there was a woman, Elizabeth, who was, I think, Mary's, the mother of Jesus, sister. And Elizabeth was, I think, the mother of the child who became John the Baptist. And in this book I read, it said that that Jesus and John played together as children, were quite close. And I thought, my God, isn't that something? And what if I mean, it's absolutely almost meaningless to us as a matter of, as a point of faith. I mean, you never know what's meaningful on a point of faith, something that might help have faith. But I don't think it would matter to me because her love was so prevalent that, like you say, that was her crucifixion, to watch Jesus be crucified like her son, how closely she stood by her son throughout his whole ministry. And there's so much of the life we don't know nothing about.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Ralph. That's wonderful. Yeah.
And I have no idea. I thought maybe someone else may have some speculation.
But maybe, I mean, it could be that John the Baptist was a perfect master.
It was,
Yeah, I think that, so Elizabeth was Mary's cousin, right? And she and Zacharias have John the Baptist, but it sounds like in the Gospels, it sounds like John had his own kind of cult following.
Yeah, eventually.
Yeah, and that, like a Upasani Maharaj, and then the Gospels present John as kind of handing everything over to Jesus, as being the Messiah. And that might be like very intentional use of language, right? That there might have been a kind of competitive cult between John's followers and Jesus's followers.
There was.
And that the Gospels present it as if John kind of acceded to Jesus's authority.
Right. Now, from the Christian early church, one of the things that they had to accomplish was to make sure that John the Baptist was subordinate to Jesus in people's imagination. And so, because there was still a following, a group of religious group that surrounded John, remember John, and even after the stories of the resurrection of Jesus. So there was rivalry. There were lots of different rival groups at the time, but that one was the most, you could say, threatening to the early church because John was a very powerful figure. And one way to read the story is that John, not Jesus, had the power of the Holy Spirit. So it's, but anyway, in the Gospels, yes, which are all, of course, from faith point of view, John is seen as the one who, hands over to Jesus. Yeah. Yeah, Ralph, what was that you want to say? Yeah.
Now I recall why that won't call it gossip. What is that? Grapevine about the mother of Jesus may have been hers. I never realized like Baba Jan was one of the five, but in all of the books that Ward has rendered, somewhere one of the was I sitting in on a reading, it says that of the five, one is always a woman. Now, I never heard that. I never saw it in God Speaks, but it doesn't say that one of them is not a woman either.
Right. How interesting.
Very
I didn't know.
Yeah. And that rekindled that grapevine that I had heard about Mary, Mary. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Well, I think we're heading towards,
3 hours.
Betty, you've been a wonderful hostess
yes,
making all this happen.
this has been great.
I hate it.
Yeah.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure, who's that?
So this goes back to the whole feminine principle idea. And my understanding is that the creation is like the beloved of Baba. And I got the impression that that was more like a feminine principle. It's the Maya principle, and that God loves his creation. And so for some reason, I had that the beloved is feminine because of that. So maybe I'm totally wrong. I mean, I never heard what Eugene said before. I mean, I never heard what Eugene said before today, but it recalled in me that Baba talks about in God Speaks about the creation. If you look at the charts and the nothing and the everything, there's and the story about the two kings. The person, the creation is a feminine figure. So I'm thinking it's a principle of femininity as opposed to a female necessarily. But I'd love to hear your insights on this.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because that's exactly what I was corresponding with David Finster about yesterday. Because I was thinking about that I had it in my head that someone had said that Mara was a kind of embodiment or representation of Maya. And he pointed me to a couple of places where that is, and that Bao talked about her in those terms. But he said, Mani put it differently. Mani said that Mara is a symbol of all of creation, and that God loves his creation. God brings his creation to himself through love to unite, and that is Baba's relationship with Mara, that she is the embodiment of all creation in the divine love story.
And of course, I mean, it helps to recall that Baba underscores that there is no such thing as creation, and there is no such thing as time or space. So this is God's dream. And we speak of it because Baba has given us ways to speak of it, but he says, there's no way for you to understand it. He gives the best terms he can give now for where we are, and next time he comes, he'll give a whole nother way of seeing it, because we will have a different capacity, if you will. But it doesn't matter. It's explained differently in different times, different periods, but it's all the same because there are no times and periods. There is, it's all now. And this dream, when we wake up, apparently, Baba says, you'll see it was nothingness to begin with, nothing into nothing. So that all of these things are interesting to us because we're in it. And I think Ralph was saying, one of the things he was saying is it might help somebody you know, to sort of figure this out, figure different things out, somebody might be touched by that, like a picture of Baba might touch somebody, or anything Baba can use to awaken himself. But that's all it is all of these stories, all of the characters in the dream are just that, to awaken himself. That's all. And so if Mara symbolizes that, what a beautiful thing. She symbolizes that she symbolizes that there is this dream that God had to have love. Without having the dream, without us in our own, you know, participating in it, we never know. God cannot know love. His nature is love, or God's nature. I shouldn't say his nature. God's nature is love. Can't be known without this, but it is just a dream. That's all it is. Yeah. According to him, I don't know myself. I'm still asleep. Oh, but yes, it was wonderful. Christopher, you did a great job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You too.
Well, no, I didn't do much, but you did the heavy lifting. It's very, very good.
Thanks, everyone. It's just so much fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Betty, thank you for making
Fabulous.
this happen.
Yeah.
Thank you for all the great questions.
Great.
Yeah.
Rosalie, I know can you make it about 2 seconds?
Yeah.
We all need to go, Rosalie, but
What's that?
I'm calling
Who-
Rosalie, who has a hand up.
Who's that?
In 2 seconds.
And then we have to go because our dogs are barking. They need to go for a little
All
walk.
right,
Yeah.
I guess this is it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Hey, Baba.
Baba.
Thank you.
Hey, Baba.
Come here, Baba.
Baba,
Keep-
keep
Hey,
it.
Hey,
come here, Baba. Keep- Hey. Have it come here, Baba. Keep- Hey.
Hey.
Hey.